Our story begins with Takaru, an ordinary office worker living in Japan. His life was dull and completely devoid of color, ruled by the same repetitive daily routine that never changed. Takaru constantly felt a deep, pressing desire for something beyond that empty existence. Every morning, he woke up, boarded the bus, and headed to work, where he remained trapped until late at night. Afterward, he returned to his old, worn-down apartment with its suffocating atmosphere, spending the rest of his day watching TikTok and similar nonsense. He longed for a better life, and in the end, that wish was finally granted. One night, Takaru suddenly awoke to find himself standing within a vast white void that contained absolutely nothing. As he focused his vision, he realized he was facing a figure with white hair who calmly announced himself as the ruler. Takaru was not a 13-year-old girl who would be dazzled by appearances, so he sat before him with complete indifference, asking where this place truly was. The ruler explained that Takaru had died and was currently in the stage of death, a realm where the soul normally fades away forever. However, the ruler had chosen to grant him a chance, sending him to a fantasy world called Muleteria, where he could begin anew and choose any role he desired. Excitement surged through Takaru as he realized this was the dream he had always been waiting for. The ruler took out a tablet and began recording the abilities that would be granted to Takaru. Soon after, without warning, Takaru was violently thrown into the world of Mateus. When Takaru regained consciousness, he found himself deep within a forest, and an unfamiliar happiness washed over him at the thought of being given a second chance at life. He stood up and explored his surroundings until he emerged from the forest and spotted a small village in the distance. His main goal was to visit the village and see what valuable things it might contain. However, he thought to himself that entering the village without money would only make people suspicious, and they would not even give him food. At that moment, he remembered that the ruler had granted him an advanced exploration skill, allowing him to locate valuable items to sell. Holding his staff, Takaru shouted to activate the magic, but nothing happened. Anxiety crept in, and he began to suspect that the ruler had deceived him. He tried another word, and the moment he said, "search," the magic activated instantly, revealing the locations of all collectible items within the forest. He acknowledged to himself how incredibly useful this skill was. He then tested another ability meant to provide additional information about objects. After trying several words, the command "scan" finally worked, granting him detailed data about the resources he collected. Takaru began gathering everything he found, analyzing it, and placing it into his magical bag, which had limitless storage capacity and required no monthly subscription fees. After collecting everything he could, he decided to head toward the village. As the sun set, Takaru reached the village gate, where a guard stood half asleep. When Takaru greeted him, the guard woke up in a panic. It became clear that all the villagers were short in stature, while Takaru towered above them. The guard asked whether he was a swordsman or a knight, and he was shocked to learn that Takaru was a resource gatherer rather than a fighter, as this profession was rare in the area. The guard opened the gate and directed him to the main shop in the center of the village. Takaru entered the quiet village and walked along its wide road, while the villagers stared at him from afar in amazement at the unusually tall stranger. He entered the main shop, which was dimly lit, where the shop owner welcomed him and asked what he wished to sell. Takaru took out a smooth oval-shaped stone. The man examined it in disbelief and said that it was ant food waste, admitting he had never seen a complete specimen like this before. He offered to buy it for 5 silver coins. Takaru calculated its value and realized it was worth roughly $350, an enormous amount most people never saw in their lifetime. He immediately agreed, while the man rubbed his face in delight. The shop owner asked whether Takaru had anything else. Takaru then revealed everything he had gathered from the forest. The man was stunned by both the quality and quantity of the resources and asked in amazement what had brought him to such a small village, explaining that these items could sell for much more in larger cities. Takaru lied, claiming he was merely a traveler collecting items from various places. Recognizing his talent, the man offered him a task to retrieve jewelry from the nearby snow mountains, warning him about the monsters that lurked there. Takaru hesitated, but when the man offered 20,000 in payment, he reluctantly accepted. After bidding farewell, Takaru searched the village until he found a small inn. He took a room and lay down on the rough bed, wishing he could take a shower to wash away the dirt and sweat. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, and a small girl entered carrying a large tray of warm water. Takaru looked at her in confusion and asked what he was supposed to do with it. She told him his smell was unpleasant and instructed him to clean himself using a cloth. When Takaru asked about a shower, the girl looked surprised and explained that showers only existed for nobles, and that that common people bathed this way. Takaru was shocked and exclaimed that even bathrooms were forbidden to them. She explained that mages could create baths using magic in exchange for money. Takeru immediately understood, gave her some coins and sweets and sent her out of the room. He locked the door and began experimenting with magic until he succeeded in creating water magic that allowed him to take a proper bath. After cleaning himself and feeling refreshed, he fell into an exhausted sleep, though he still missed the idea of a real shower. He woke up very early the next morning and returned to the forest to gather more items. While searching for mushrooms, he noticed a strange sign protruding from the bushes. When he went to investigate, he discovered a decaying corpse lying there, which frightened him so badly that he fell onto his back. After calming down, Takaru realized the man had been part of a security unit and had died fighting monsters. Although he considered fleeing, he ultimately chose to continue. Takaru lifted the body, buried it properly, and planted the man's sword above the grave as a marker. Once finished, he decided to prepare dinner. As the sun was about to set, he first created a magical barrier around himself for protection. He sat on the ground, placed a pot over a fire he had lit, and since he was not an idiot, chose to cook for himself. Using wild vegetables he had gathered along with a bit of meat, he prepared a wonderful stew. Its delicious taste made the end of his day peaceful and satisfying. On the following morning, Takaru headed toward the haunted forest, a place covered with dead trees and dense fog so thick that visibility was extremely poor even in broad daylight. Takaru used light magic to illuminate his path and move deeper into the forest, fully aware that it was home to monsters. Despite his careful search, he did not encounter a single living creature. He began collecting everything of value, and once he finished, he decided to leave. While moving forward, he noticed a light heading toward the exit and rushed toward it, unaware that he was running straight toward a dangerous edge. Takeru fell into a deep chasm and nearly lost his life, but he reacted quickly by using flight magic, allowing him to control his descent and stop midair. He landed softly on the ground and released a deep sigh of relief, realizing how close he had come to death. From that moment on, he decided to take matters more seriously and act with extreme caution. Takaru activated light magic once again inside the cave and was shocked to discover that the area was filled with various ores and minerals. He took out a small pickaxe and began breaking rocks and separating metals, filling his bag with a decent amount. He noticed another ore farther away, but a sudden earthquake shook the area, reminding him not to stay too long. He was forced to use fireball magic to quickly break the rock and extract the metal. Fortunately, it turned out to be mithril, the exact mineral requested by the shop owner. He quickly placed it into his bag, but despite a second tremor, he chose to continue deeper into the cave. Shortly after, he noticed a blue light coming from the end of the tunnel. He followed it until he reached a large opening, at the center of which lay a lake of unnaturally blue water. Takaru descended quickly and scanned the lake using the scan spell, discovering that the water was S rank, the highest quality of magical water. A strange happiness filled him, and he decided that he had to take some. He began wondering whether he had a container large enough, or if the water would leak out. Before he could think further, a massive black dragon suddenly emerged from the depths of the lake, spraying water everywhere and soaking Takeru. The dragon shouted, asking who had awakened it from its sleep. Takeru, accustomed to his former life as a spiritless employee, instinctively adopted the submissive behavior he used with everyone, and began apologizing for entering the place. The dragon burst into laughter, amazed that this was the first time it had seen someone with such nerves, and asked who he was. Takeru replied that he was just an ordinary human, but the dragon refused to believe him, saying that it sensed enormous magical energy within him, nearly equal to that of dragons. The dragon explained that it needed help with something only an extremely strong individual could do, then spoke of an egg that had refused to hatch for a long time, and asked if Takaru could help. To convince him, the dragon touched the water, causing dozens of large mithril ores to emerge from the lake. Takaru immediately agreed. The dragon took out a massive black egg and threw it to Takaru. Takaru held it, tried to sense its pulse, and wondered what he should do next. Remembering that eggs require warmth, he began using heat magic to warm it. Suddenly, the egg started absorbing all the energy from his body. Takaru thought it was a trick and that he was about to die before losing consciousness. He woke up surrounded by warm water, and a second ruler with black hair appeared before him, telling him that what he had done was beginning to disrupt the balance of the world. When Takaru asked if he was dead, the ruler replied that he was not, yet. Suddenly, Takaru regained consciousness in darkness. He activated light magic and saw a small dragon emerging from the egg. The large dragon was filled with joy, while the small dragon swayed as it learned to stand. The dragon thanked Takaru and asked him to name the hatchling. In his usual foolish manner, he named her Bee. The large dragon then surprised Takaru by declaring that Bee would live with him from now on. Takaru could hardly believe that such a rare and beautiful creature would be bound to him, but the dragon reassured him that Takaru himself was very strong and would know how to protect her. The dragon then submerged into the water and disappeared disappeared, leaving Takeru and B to begin their journey together. Takeru and B exited the cave as night approached. B flew around him happily, seeing the world from above for the first time. Realizing how late it was, Takeru decided to set up a nearby camp. He filled a cup with water from the magical lake, as the ancient dragon had used magic to connect Takeru's bag directly to the lake, since the water was essential for B's growth. B drank one cup and asked for more, so Takeru refilled it, but she suddenly handed the cup back to him so he could drink and share her joy. After that, Takeru used magical stones to create a barrier around the area, without chanting spells aloud. He knew these stones were extremely rare, and had read about them in a book he purchased, but this did not concern him, as Takeru could easily create magical stones himself. He focused heat magic in his hand and created a stone that produced a steady cooking flame. Once the fire was lit, he began preparing a meat stew. When B saw the food, her drool was clearly visible. Takeru told her she would like it and filled a plate for her, warning her that it was hot, but she swallowed it in one bite and burned her tongue. Takeru had to blow on the food to cool it for her. She drank until she was full, then fell asleep from exhaustion. Feeling how gentle she was, Takeru asked if she missed her father, and B told him that she was happy being with him. Takeru opened her information page and was shocked to see that her rank was B, and that she possessed extremely powerful gifts. Though surprised, he told himself that even if she was strong, she was still a child who needed guidance. He then began advising her to listen to him and avoid reckless behavior. On the following morning, Takeru climbed the cliff from which he had fallen the day before. When he reached the forest, he was shocked by how completely different it looked, and he assumed this was due to the fluctuations of this strange world. While surveying the area around him, Takeru decided to search for some new useful herbs, and he did manage to find several of them. Suddenly, Takeru felt a strange sting, and in the next second, B flew toward him in panic, clearly frightened by something. Immediately, Takeru began scanning his surroundings for monsters, and several indicators appeared on his radar. He was deeply puzzled, since there had been no monsters the day before, and he began to suspect that the foul smell which had driven monsters away had disappeared after bathing. He was not afraid of fighting, as it could result in acquiring some good materials. The threat was not limited to the forest alone. Suddenly, a C-rank rock falcon appeared behind him. B froze in terror at its predatory appearance, while Takeru found it cute compared to the ancient dragon he had encountered earlier. When he read the monster's description, he learned that its meat was delicious, and that alone was reason enough to hunt it. Takeru created armor and then fired ice arrows at the falcon, dropping it to the ground instantly. He was pleased with obtaining the material, but B pointed out more monsters emerging from the forest. As soon as he turned around, he saw wolves whose tails were snakes. Takeru decided to fight them at close range. He cast spells that reduced his weight and increased his speed, and when the first wolf attacked, Takeru leapt high with ease. He then hardened his body into iron and slammed his foot down onto the wolf's head, killing it instantly. The remaining wolves attacked, but Takeru was far faster, dodging their strikes and defeating them with swift and powerful blows. Takeru collected the meat from all the monsters, but then noticed even more monsters approaching from the forest. He felt irritated, unwilling to spend the entire day fighting. At that moment, B decided to help, and attempted to lift him and fly. Takeru did not expect her to be able to carry him, but B used her innate strength and succeeded. Takeru tried to assist by reducing his weight with a spell, but B did not notice, and suddenly he was launched into the sky. Takeru panicked and screamed that she was flying too high, which frightened B, causing her to drop him. Takeru continued screaming as he fell, but the trees softened his descent, allowing him to land safely. B flew to him and began licking his face, while Takeru was slightly tense around her. When he stood up, he realized that he had already left the forest, as B was faster than a fighter jet. He thanked her and asked her to be calmer next time, since he was far weaker than she was. B did not understand his complicated words, hugged him tightly, and broke two of his ribs. After that, they continued toward the village, with Takeru holding a branch he had found in his bag. He told B that this branch belonged to the legendary Treaders, which embodied the world itself, but was currently asleep. B knew how to awaken anything, so she blew her sharp scent onto it, and suddenly the branch transformed into a staff. Takeru was shocked and began wondering whether someone like him should even use a staff, as he did not want people to think he was just an ordinary mage. His thoughts were interrupted by a loud roar. He tensed and prepared for combat, but B flew toward the source of the sound. Takeru ran after her, and when he arrived, he found her circling a tree. As he approached, he saw an exhausted elf girl with torn clothes. He asked whether a monster had attacked her, and she denied it. Suddenly, her stomach made the sound that had frightened him earlier. The girl told Takeru that she had not eaten or drunk anything for 3 days. Takeru was shocked to realize that the roar had come from her stomach. She asked him for water, and he handed her the bottle, which she emptied in a single gulp. She felt slightly better, but hunger still dominated her. Takeru searched his bag for his lunch container and gave it to her. The girl devoured the food completely, then burst into joyful excitement. Takeru was surprised, as he had never expected elf girls to be this uncivilized. Takeru told her that the food tasted good because she was hungry and asked how she had run out of supplies so quickly with a village nearby. She grew flustered by the question, and Takeru began scolding her, saying that even beginners carry food on trips. She became annoyed and nearly started a fight, but he quickly backed off. Smell was awful, so he said that he had thought elves smelled like mint and strawberries, but her scent was like a stable. The girl became angry and said she had not been able to bathe because she had been sleeping in the forest for days. She then thanked him for the food, but added that it was rude to mock someone he had just met, calling his behavior unmanly before running away. Takeru felt irritated that his first encounter with an elf had gone this way. Takeru returned to gathering his belongings and then left the forest. B spotted a carriage approaching from a distance, amazing Takeru. As it drew closer, he saw it was pulled by a unicorn horse. The merchant driving the carriage was surprised to see Takeru, pointed at him, and asked what he was doing in such a place. Takeru replied that he was heading to a village on foot. Members of the merchant's family leaned out of the carriage to see who he was. The merchant noticed the staff Takeru was carrying and asked whether he was a mage. Takeru grew tense and replied that he was merely a resource gatherer, which surprised the merchant even more, as gatherers of this class were extremely rare. The merchant offered Takeru a ride in the carriage, as they were also heading toward the village of Tirmi. Takeru asked whether his height and weight would cause any trouble, but the man did not mind. Takeru climbed aboard and noticed the children staring at his height in amazement. He thanked them and told them that helping others was a natural thing. He tried to joke with the children by asking what they would do if he were a thief, but the boy confidently replied that it was impossible for him to be a thief because the bell did not ring. Takeru was surprised, so the woman showed him a bell containing a magical crystal that rang whenever a bad person approached. Takeru became excited and said that he could create such a crystal himself. Takeru introduced himself, and they introduced themselves as Balom, the father, Eliza, the mother, and the children Yona and Kain. While they were talking, they heard a strange sound. The children thought it was coming from Takeru's back and became eager to see what he was hiding. Takeru grew tense and said it was a rare monster that would surprise them. Eliza reassured him that having monsters with adventurers was normal, which encouraged Takeru to bring out B, asking her not to bite anyone. The children were amazed by her beauty, while Balaam and Eliza were shocked, as dragons were extremely rare. Balaam asked Takeru if he was a dragon knight, but Takeru replied that he had found the egg by chance and hatched it, which shocked them even more. Takeru felt curious to learn more about dragon knights, remembering how they were considered great figures in his former world. Night fell, and the family began setting up camp. Takeru created light and placed magical stones as a barrier around the area, telling them that these stones would repel monsters and that B would warn them of any danger. The family trusted B more than the stones, which annoyed Takeru internally. Eliza wanted to cook, but Takeru asked her to let him do it. He took out his tools and ingredients from his magical bag, astonishing them once again. He prepared a meal using what he had gathered, and everyone was amazed by its taste. Balom cried, saying he was tired of eating dry meat every day, and told Takeru that he was a mage, and a mage of cooking as well. Everyone laughed, danced, and sang before sleeping. Takeru was moved, as he had never eaten with others on this world before, and he felt that sharing a meal was a true blessing. In the morning, Balom was cleaning the horse and carriage, while the children and B were asleep. Takeru was awake, polishing his scissors until they shone. Eliza came out and told him that someone who cared for his tools was an excellent adventurer. Takeru felt enjoyment in his life and realized that he might truly possess talent in the gatherer class he had obtained by chance. They finished preparing to leave, but this time Takeru asked to drive the carriage, and Balaam agreed without hesitation. Takeru sat at the front beside Balaam, and they traveled smoothly. The unicorn horse was very intelligent, following Takeru's commands perfectly. B later woke up and flew toward him quickly, before stopping at his feet. After hours of comfortable travel, they spotted the village of Tirmi and soon reached its gate. Takeru got down and thanked Balom and his family for the pleasant time before they continued on their way. The guard recognized Balom and told him that he always brings summer and spring with him. Takeru was puzzled and asked the guard what that meant, and the guard explained that Balom and his family followed warm regions for their work, traveling after pleasant weather, and that their arrival meant warmth and spring. The guard also mentioned that hunting had become scarce recently. Takeru remembered how happy Balom had been with the food and felt grateful for his gathering ability, which freed him from worrying about money and meals. Takeru entered to meet the person responsible for the task he had been given and presented what he had gathered. The man examined the items slowly, but focused intently on one stone. He turned to Takeru and asked where he had found it, saying it was not ordinary mithril, but magical mithril. Takeru was surprised and did not understand, but the man explained that it was a legendary stone containing an enormous amount of mana, and that even a few small pieces could replace the kingdom's regular magic stones. Takeru was shocked, but hid the truth and said he had found it by chance. The man laughed and said this showed great talent and luck. advising him not to waste himself there and to go to the city of Belmonent, where many wealthy people would buy such items and where he would learn more. He also advised him to join the Adventurers Guild. That evening, Takeru researched guilds in his room and learned their benefits, but he decided not to rush his departure and to stay 2 more days in Tirmi. After a few days, Takeru decided to gift the village the meat he had hunted. Due to the lack of hunting, the villagers were happy with the gift and ate joyfully, and the village leaders were also pleased. After several more days of wandering and gathering, it was time to leave. A kind old woman gave him spices and seasonings for his journey, telling him that the village had grown used to him and did not want him to leave. Takeru promised to return. She also gave him homemade food sufficient for the long journey that would take about a month to reach Belmonent, telling him that if he grew tired or missed them, he should come back. Takeru thanked her and returned to his room. Takeru wanted to sleep, and B fell asleep as well, but he remembered the love the villagers had shown him and decided to return the kindness. He went to the table and looked at the lantern and the magic stone, thinking of the guard who stood outside protecting the village all night. He decided to use mana and merge the lantern with the stone, creating a new magical tool. In the morning, the entire village gathered to bid farewell to Takeru. Takeru felt that this place had truly become a home to him, so he presented them with the gift he had crafted, a lantern combined with a magical barrier that would protect them from monsters. Unbelievable joy spread through the village, but the shop owner took the device and opened it, discovering that the magic stone was still inside. He hurried to return it to Takeru, but Takeru ran off quickly and told him to keep it for the village. Everyone said their goodbyes, and Takeru continued on his journey. As he walked through the fresh air, he was suddenly confronted by a giant crab. He panicked for a moment, then used his skill and discovered that it was a C-rank monster, not very strong and suitable for eating. Takeru shouted to B that its meat was delicious. He prepared himself and activated body enhancement magic, but before he could attack, B unleashed a sonic explosion that flipped the crab onto its back. Before Takeru could collect the crab meat, 2 more crabs appeared, swaying left and right. Takeru thought about using their movement against them, but was shocked when they charged straight at him. With no time to escape, he thought he would die like this, but B grabbed his clothes and lifted him into the air. The 2 crabs collided with each other and died. The first crab continued charging toward him, but Takeru was ready and struck it with a powerful blow from his staff, killing it. That evening, Takeru prepared a feast. He cut the crab legs, placed them in a pot of water with spices, and made a thick soup. Once the food was cooked, he and B began cracking the shells and eating. It was his first crab meal in the new world, and it tasted wonderful. Takeru told B that he was excited to travel the world and try more kinds of food. A few days later, Takeru arrived at the gate of the city of Bliet, a massive fortified city built beside the water. He stood in line to enter and, to avoid looking suspicious, changed the appearance of his magical bag into that of a normal one, and asked B to hide. When his turn came, the staff inspected his bag, scanned his identification card, and performed a simple secret check. Everything was fine, but the official noted that he possessed a dragon blessing, which was somewhat unusual. Takeru revealed B, astonishing them, but the official insisted that she be given an identification mark. Takeru placed a bracelet on her tail, then entered the city. The city was crowded and full of different races, with elves, warriors, and mages walking side by side. Takeru headed straight for the Adventurers Guild building. Inside, he found it filled with fighters and professionals. Suddenly, a demi-human girl with rabbit ears named Ariana appeared and greeted him, asking if he wanted to register. Takeru agreed and followed her. She asked about his experience, and he replied that he had hunted a strange bird, some wolves, and a few giant crabs. Ariana was shocked and asked for proof. Calmly, Takeru pulled out a full dead crab from his bag and dropped it onto the table. The table broke. Ariana ran back in fear, and people gathered to watch. One beast folk used his skill and told Ariana to calm down, explaining that Takeru's intentions were blue, meaning good. Takeru was puzzled. People asked why he was carrying a dead crab, and he replied that he was going to eat it, asking who would leave good meat to spoil. The people were shocked, as no one there ate crab, but no one objected. The beast folk told Ariana to complete his registration and asked him if he had any partners. Takeru answered that it was him and B the dragon. Everyone around them was shocked, as a rare dragon with a rare resource gatherer was an almost impossible combination. Ariana took Takeru to another room. He thought he would receive something valuable, but he only received the guild stamp on his papers, officially making him an F-rank adventurer. The very beginning, Takeru was not upset, and instead let his imagination wander toward the great adventures that awaited him. Half a month passed after entering the city, and Takeru became loved by everyone. He always returned with high-value items that sold within seconds, to the point that people requested him by name for missions, as he never overcharged and always brought items worth every coin. Takeru returned to the guild carrying a new load of magic mushrooms he had gathered from the Mike Tyson area. The beast man behind the counter carefully inspected the mushrooms, knowing that Mike Tyson could cut off someone's ear if the mushrooms were bad, but with Takaru, he never worried, as the quality was always excellent. Before paying him, Ariana entered carrying a stack of new mission papers and told him that half the city specifically wanted him. Takaru looked at the amount and said it was impossible to complete all of them at once, so he took half and left the other half. After finishing his work, Takeru decided to relax and went to the public bath to soak in hot water and ease his body. He sat there sighing in pleasure, as the hot water was very comforting, while B swayed happily in the water. Takaru remembered how filthy the water had been on his first day in the city, but now, thanks to the magic he had mastered, it was clean, hot, and comfortable for everyone. Suddenly, a silver lizard man named Clayston entered, greeted Takaru, and asked how he was doing. Takaru replied and asked how he was here at this time when he was always on missions. Clayston sat beside him and said that his old wounds had recently started hurting again, and he wanted the hot water to soothe them. When Takeru heard that he was treated with magic, Clayston asked if he had truly healed the sick man in the slums. Takeru laughed and said he had only applied something he had seen in the past. Clayston asked whether he had taken money for it, already knowing the answer was no. He told Takaru that he could earn gold from healing, as healers were rare here. Takaru felt uneasy about making enemies among other healers, but Clayston laughed and told him that he had received a notice qualifying him for a rank promotion. Takeru replied that he was not in a hurry and preferred to stay out of the spotlight. Clayston warned him that this would draw even more attention and that people who wanted to destroy him might appear, telling him to be careful. After the bath, Takaru returned to the counter to receive his payment, while B ate biscuits. The clerk asked him as usual when he would raise his rank. Takaru smiled and said that he still wanted to arrange a few things first. He knew that a higher rank would bring much better pay, but it would also bring greater responsibilities, and he was comfortable with his current situation. Suddenly, the guild door burst open, and a messenger rushed in shouting that the city was about to be attacked and that a swarm of goblins was approaching. The guild fell into chaos within seconds, as everyone began running to put on armor and grab their swords. The guildmaster asked about high-rank adventurers, and the girl Ariana informed him that only Clayston was currently available. The master announced that all high ranks and above must immediately participate in the defense. Takaru stood watching, telling himself that this was not his responsibility, as he was still F rank. However, the guildmaster called out to him and demanded his participation, explaining that they needed him. He told him that the goblins would most likely come from the western side and attack the bridge, and that if they crossed it, the city would be in danger. The best plan was to stop them before they reached the gate. Excitement spread through the guild. Warriors shouted optimistically, while Takaru thought to himself, "Why did I end up here among these gangs? I was barely living a peaceful life." Two muscular men standing nearby approached him and told him to move aside so he would not be crushed under their feet. Before Takaru could respond, the guildmaster interrupted and asked, "Are you Takaru, the one people keep praising?" He said he wanted to see how true those words were and expressed his admiration that Takaru did not fear him, then left with Ariana. Ariana apologized to Takaru, explaining that lower ranks usually did not participate in battles, but the guildmaster must have seen something special in him. She admitted that this was her first war, and due to intense excitement and fear, she suddenly began to cry and tremble, then threw herself into his arms, begging him to save her. Takaru thought to himself that this kindness would become a disaster if it continued during the war. He calmed her down and told her to focus only on healing the injured, as that alone was enough. She regained her composure and ran to her tent to help. Suddenly, Clayston appeared from the darkness laughing. Takaru was surprised and asked why he had not gone to the front line. Clayston replied that his wound was hurting him. Takaru immediately touched the spot, which surprised Clayston, who asked if he remembered seeing him running. Takeru told him that it was impossible for such a wound to have occurred while protecting someone important, calling it a wound of bravery. Before they could continue, Clayston focused his gaze on the dust approaching the city, his expression changing as he said that the plan had failed and the goblins had crossed. Takeru grabbed a spear and ran. He shouted for Clayston to return because he was injured, but Clayston replied that he had people to protect and charged forward. Takeru realized that he had to fight himself. He activated a magical barrier around the injured tent and ran at full speed toward the battle. He found people fallen, soldiers retreating, and goblins advancing toward the city. The two muscular men who had bothered him were fighting, but the goblins were slipping past them from behind. Takeru had no intention of letting them reach the city, so he activated enhancement magic and delivered a powerful punch that sent the first goblin flying. He noticed that they were stronger than the types he had encountered before. Takeru called out to B, who descended from his shoulder and began kicking and striking every goblin in the area, causing them to fall like pins. The soldiers thanked Takeru, telling him that the battle had been going well, until a high-rank goblin suddenly appeared and broke through the front line with a single blow. Everything so far had been possible thanks to Clayston, who allowed them to retreat and hold the defensive line. Sensing that Clayston was in trouble, Takeru rushed toward the forest. Upon entering, he found Clayston fighting a group of goblins, cutting them down one by one. Suddenly, the wound on his back flared with intense pain, his knee stopped moving, and he fell to his knees. It was a fatal mistake as the goblins immediately lunged to kill him. Fortunately, Takeru arrived at the last moment and shocked all the goblins, paralyzing them and saving Clayton's life. Before they could retreat, the large goblin appeared and leapt at them. They both avoided the strike, but found themselves surrounded again. Clayton shouted for Takeru to escape, saying he would stop them. Takeru decided to try a new move. B shocked some of the goblins and caused chaos. At that moment, Takeru took out the mono water he had brought from the cave and poured it entirely over Clayton, then cast a healing spell that not only healed his wound, but transformed him into a half-dragon. Clayton turned into a literal monster and began crushing and destroying every goblin around him alone until the battle ended, leaving him as the only one standing. After some time, the guild master arrived, thanked Takeru for his help and promised to repay him. That same night, Clayton entered Takeru's room, having returned to his normal form. He asked in disbelief whether Takeru had enchanted him. Takeru explained that it was mono water from a lake in the territory of an ancient dragon. Clayton was shocked and said that his ancestors had once been dragons, but now he was merely a lizard. He admitted that thanks to Takeru, he had returned to a half-dragon form, but confessed that he was terrified of using it again, fearing he might lose control and destroy everything. Takeru reassured him and told him not to worry. Suddenly, Clayton grew serious and asked who Takeru really was. At that moment, Takeru decided to tell him the truth, saying that he had reincarnated here after dying in another world. Clayton was surprised and did not believe it at first, but after everything he had witnessed, he no longer knew what to believe. They agreed to sleep, as the night had been long. The next morning, Takeru woke early and walked through the city. He passed a shop selling tools and weapons and stopped to look through the window. The shop owner came out and asked if he was interested in weapons or relics. Takeru said he was looking for a good pair of scissors for gathering. The shop owner, Riburu, told him that she did not have ready-made scissors, but she immediately realized that he was the famous gatherer everyone was talking about. She said she could provide him with excellent scissors, as the master blacksmiths had a legendary craftsman, but to make them, they needed specific materials that Takeru would have to bring. Takeru was surprised and entered with her. He was astonished to find himself inside a forge where 3 blacksmiths were working amid the fire. Riburu introduced him to the master blacksmith Grit, whose face was always stern. Riburu said she had fallen in love with the sound of iron being hammered. She suggested that Takeru could bring them draw ore from the mic mine, a material crucial for entering the upcoming sword forging competition. The elf Grit refused, saying he would not allow an ordinary gatherer to enter such a mine. Riburu argued with him, and the two quarreled. In the end, she grabbed his chin and said that they needed to win the competition, not forge an incomplete sword. Grit became angry and said the mine was dangerous, with rumors of demons, and that he cared about his customers' safety and would not send Takeru there. Riburu was moved by his words and apologized to Takeru for wasting his time. Takeru calmly placed a plate of biscuits in front of the elf Grit and said, "All right, if I bring you Aldra Ore, will you make the scissors for me?" Grew tense and said he did not want to bear responsibility for anyone's death, but Takeru reassured him that he could protect himself. He then pulled a crab claw from his pocket, and the moment Grit saw it, he realized it was from a B-rank monster and immediately agreed. The next day, Takeru rode a carriage with other adventurers on his way to the Maruhike mine, while B hopped excitedly. The adventurers began talking about strange events in the area, such as plants suddenly dying and terrifying sounds coming from the forests. Takeru felt slightly uneasy, wondering if he might be the cause, but quickly dismissed the thought. Upon arrival, Takeru passed by a horse trader and thought that one day he would like to buy a mount. Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice shouting at the merchant. It was the strange elf girl he had saved before. She was blaming the trader, saying she had asked for a strong and fast white horse, but he had given her a large white bird instead. The trader explained that any creature capable of carrying someone was considered a horse here. She realized her mistake and said she had meant a Pegasus, and the trader told her that Pegasi did not exist here, but only in the kingdom of the elves. Takeru listened from a distance and did not want to get involved with her again. However, while walking, he entered the forest to gather mushrooms and flowers, and suddenly heard screaming. He went to investigate and found her collapsed from hunger, just like before. He gave her food and water and thought to himself that her mind was abnormally empty. As soon as she ate, she woke up and thanked him, but her smell was awful, so Takeru cleaned her against her will using a spell. She was surprised and asked what he had done, and he told her, "I cleaned you. You were ruining the image I had of elves." She introduced herself as Brolite and thanked him for saving her twice. Takeru told her there was no need for thanks and started walking, but she stopped him and said that elves must repay kindness and that she wanted to help him. Takeru said he needed nothing, so she insisted on helping with his work. Bee flew toward her, and Brolight said that even the dragon approved of her presence. Takeru agreed to let her walk with him until the first city. While he was gathering mushrooms, Brolight kept returning to him excitedly. Once she claimed she had found rare monster droppings, but it turned out to be just a shadow. Another time she brought ordinary droppings. The third time, she brought poisonous mushrooms. In the evening, Brolight said she would gather firewood, but Takeru told her he would use a magic stone instead. Brolight insisted, saying that fire signaled to travelers that the place was safe. Takeru agreed, but she returned carrying an enormous piece of wood. Takeru told her it was not suitable for burning, so she threw it into the air and cut it apart with her dagger. At that moment, Takeru realized that her dagger was A rank. Takeru cooked a delicious meal. Brolight went wild over the taste and asked him if he was heading to the kingdom of the elves. He told her yes, for Aldra Or. He asked about her destination, and she hesitated, saying she was searching for a Pegasus her sister wished to see, then returned to joking. Takeru had an idea and asked her to be his guard for the rest of the journey. Brolight was thrilled and said she would protect him from evil, while Takeru's true aim was to learn useful things from her, such as the matter of firewood. Brolight was shocked that he wanted such a simple exchange for food, but she agreed and pretended to be a refined elf. Takeru was excited to travel with an elf for the first time, but his excitement vanished when she began snoring so loudly that he did not sleep all night. The next day, they reached the border city. Takeru went to try elf cuisine. Brolight told him that the taste was exactly as her friend, the lizard man, had described. Takeru said he also had a lizard man friend. Brolight laughed and said that her friend was a dragon knight and the leader of the Astylus Empire. The words struck Takeru's mind hard. Suddenly, a familiar voice spoke from behind them, asking if someone had said his name. They turned to find Clayston standing there. Takeru and Brolight were shocked, while Clayston laughed and said that fate seemed determined to bring his friends together. Clayston looked at Takeru and asked how he dared to leave the country without telling him. Takeru grew tense and said he had informed the guild. Clayston was not convinced and asked about his destination. When he learned that Takeru was heading to the Maruhike mines, he began shouting, saying that adventurers of his rank could not accept such dangerous tasks, and that the place was terrifying and not worth going to without a massive reward. Takeru snapped back, saying he would receive a respectable reward. A legendary blacksmith would craft him ultimate scissors for gathering materials. Clayston was shocked and exclaimed what kind of reward that was, but Takeru was convinced that befriending the blacksmith would lead to legendary cooking tools as well. Clayston then said that Takeru's mind was in the wrong place for agreeing to something like that. Despite Takeru insisting that scissors were the most important tool for a gatherer, Clayston suddenly said he would come with them on the mission, as he was heading to the lands of the elves to repair his spear. Takeru was not comfortable with the idea at all, but Brolight rushed in energetically and asked Clayston if he would also be Takeru's guard, boasting that she was already protecting him. Clayston liked her words and agreed to be a guard as well. Takeru felt irritated, knowing that their personalities would give him a headache, even if they were strong. After a short while, they arrived at the capital of the elves. However, they found a long line stretching in front of the city gate. Fortunately, Clayston knew the guards, so they were allowed to enter through the VIP gate. As they descended the long stairways, the guard began explaining the history of the city. Once they reached the bottom, Takeru and Brolight were stunned by the sight before them, as the mountain itself had been carved from the inside into an entire city. After that, the guard informed Clayston that the king wished to see him. Takeru was surprised to learn that Clayston knew the king, and Clayston explained that his relationship with the king was indeed good, though he did not deserve it. The guard said to him, "Do not be modest. You are the hero who saved the country." Clayston replied that it was a misunderstanding and began explaining the story to Takeru. In the past, the elves were skilled at forging weapons, but poor at using them. So a powerful demon had taken control of them and demanded tribute. One day, Clayston happened to pass by, and when the demon saw him, it fled for unknown reasons. The elves believed that Clayston was the one who had frightened it away, and since that day, they had regarded him as a hero. The guard added that they still viewed him as a hero, and had even built him a new statue. Clayston held his head in disbelief when he saw that the statue depicted him in a form resembling Godzilla. When they arrived at the palace, Clayston complained to the king about the statue, but the king replied that the people saw him as a great figure. The king then turned to Takeru and asked about the reason for his visit. Takeru handed him a letter from the legendary blacksmith and requested permission to enter the Aldra mines. The king asked whether he knew that the mines had become infested with demons after the recent earthquake, and Takeru confirmed that he was aware. Clayston intervened, telling the king that he would accompany Takeru as his guard and guarantee his sufficient strength. The king agreed to allow them entry and permitted them to investigate the cause behind the increase in demons. Clayston accepted immediately, while Takeru nearly cried as he had not wanted to get involved in an investigation mission. But once the country's hero Clayston spoke, the matter was settled. After that, they entered the mines, accompanied by an elf guide named Zambo. Takeru illuminated the cave with magic and then cast a spell to memorize the map. As expected, Clayston and Brolight commented that he was doing impossible things as usual. Takaru ignored them and began searching for Aldra ore, but instead, found some inferior ores, astonishing Zambo simply by locating them. When Takeru suggested going deeper, Zambo warned him of an approaching danger. Takeru confirmed this using his search skill, and seconds later, 2 spiders appeared. Clayston killed one with a single strike. Takeru paralyzed the second, and Brolight finished it off. They continued onward, and Takaru discovered a massive amount of Aldra ore behind a wall. After receiving permission, he blew the wall apart and revealed a vast space filled with purple crystals. Takaru assumed it was Aldra ore, but Zambo told him that it was Aldrite, far rarer and much more valuable. Takaru failed to grasp its true worth. Suddenly, Takaru sensed danger again, and Zambo shouted that a demon was approaching. Takaru stepped forward and said that they should leave the monster to him, declaring that it was no ordinary demon, but a giant demonic crab. Takaru was nearly drooling with excitement, thinking that he wanted to eat its meat raw if possible. Clayston and Brolight stood in shock. Brolight shouted at him to watch out, and fortunately, Takaru heard her and jumped aside, narrowly avoiding a claw strike that would have split him in half. Clayston and Brolight warned him that the monster was high-ranked and that they needed to cooperate to defeat it, but Takaru refused so that no one else would take the best piece of meat, ordering them to endure without using fire or lightning. Takaru then grabbed his staff and laughed wildly, casting enhancement spells on himself to increase his speed and reduce his weight. He attacked the crab with full force, only to realize that even a direct hit did not leave a scratch. The crab struck him and sent him flying, but he landed on his feet. When the crab shoved him away again, B froze its leg to the ground. Takaru thanked her and examined the crab's body until he found 3 weak joints. He then summoned ice spears, which B wrapped in air and spun at high speed. Takeru struck the joints, freezing the crab completely. Everyone was stunned, while Takeru and B offered prayers for the unfortunate crab. Clayston went mad with frustration because he had not participated in the fight. Takeru apologized, explaining that killing it normally would have covered the meat in blood and mud and ruined it. Clayston was shocked by Takeru's intention to eat the monster and became angry that, as a guard, he had been rendered useless. Takaru apologized again, saying he was used to fighting this type of enemy. Clayston replied that they should work as a team next time. Takaru and B apologized once more, and Clayston patted their heads, telling them it was fine, then asked them to carry the crab and leave. After that, the group began gathering Aldrite crystals. Takaru told Zambo that he could still sense more ore deeper inside. Zambo cried with joy, realizing that Takaru had discovered a new mine. At that moment, Takaru began to feel that all the changes occurring in the world were caused by the guild and that this would alter the course of history. He understood the intention of the leader who had brought him here, and as he walked behind his companions, he reflected that his selfish decisions were truly changing the world, praying that the change would be for the better. They returned to the palace, where Takeru informed the king that they had completed the investigation and eliminated the greatest threat. The king was delighted, but asked for confirmation from Zambo, who excitedly explained how Takeru had defeated the crab and requested that it be shown to the king. Takeru opened his magical bag and the crab jumped out, causing the entire palace to tremble. The king was shocked by its size and approached to see it for himself, declaring that Takeru's bravery deserved a reward. Takeru asked for the crab. The king was astonished, as he saw little value in it. Afterward, they went out into the city. Brolight was happy about the large sum of money they had received from the king, but Takaru did not care, as all he could think about was how he would cook the crab. Clayston began to feel uneasy when he saw Takaru and his companion drooling in a terrifying manner. On the following day, Brolight received a Pegasus as a gift from the king, who had learned that she had been searching for one. Brolight rejoiced hysterically, and at the same time, Zambo handed Clayston his repaired spear. Brolight mounted the Pegasus and told Takeru that she would immediately take it to her sister, saying that she was indebted to him for life. Takeru replied, "Don't worry about it, I got the crab." When the carriages arrived, Takeru bid her farewell, and she told him, "We will definitely meet again," before taking flight and disappearing into the sky. After a few days, Takaru and Clayston arrived back in their city, where they were welcomed by the rabbit-eared girl. She was surprised to see them together and asked if they had formed a team. Takaru denied it, saying that Clayston had merely been traveling with him, but Clayston interrupted and confirmed that they had indeed formed a team. Ariana was delighted and ran off to inform the master immediately, while Takeru shot Clayston a sideways glance. Clayston explained that he had decided to stay with him for a longer period, as he knew Takeru was not an ordinary human and that someone sensible needed to keep an eye on him. Takeru was not completely certain about forming a team with Clayston, but B liked the idea from the start and began circling him happily. After some thought, Takeru told himself that traveling together would not be a bad thing. The three of them sat down to think of a team name, and at Clayston's suggestion, they decided to name their group Black Claw Squad. officially registering it at the guild. After that, Takeru headed to the blacksmith's workshop carrying the aldrite crystals. When Riburu and her master examined the crystals, Takeru asked whether this amount was enough to forge the sword they wanted. Suddenly, both of them began shaking violently. Takeru grew tense, thinking that the extremely high purity of the aldrite made it difficult to handle. Instead, they shouted and burst into tears of joy, as they had never seen crystals of such purity in their entire lives. The master said that he had spent 120 years in blacksmithing and had never once seen aldrite this pure. Even the boy almost cried, wanting to help. Takeru was happy that what he had brought impressed them, but Riburu told him that they would not be able to pay for all of this aldrite. He replied that he only wanted his original request, scissors designed specifically for him, and that he was willing to postpone it, as he wanted Riburu and her master to focus first on forging the sword for the upcoming blacksmith tournament. Half a month later, while Takeru was eating and drinking at a tavern, the innkeeper approached him with a letter from a noble who wished to see him urgently. Takeru did not want to get involved with nobles and pretended that he was suffering from kidney failure, but Cleiston told him to stop talking nonsense. Even the innkeeper reassured him, saying that Lord Belmonent was not a bad person. Takeru opened the letter and found that it was addressed to both him and Cleiston as a team, stating that the Lord wished to grant them the honor of a medal. Takeru grew suspicious and asked what the Lord wanted in return, but Cleiston understood and explained that the Lord most likely wanted to see B. Takeru became nervous and hugged B, asking if they intended to kidnap her, but Cleiston and the innkeeper reassured him that the Lord did not have the authority to do so. After that, they were taken to the Lord's mansion in a luxurious carriage, with people in the streets staring at them. Takeru was puzzled by the attention, and Cleiston explained that being hosted by a noble was every adventurer's dream, as it could change their entire future. When they arrived at the mansion, Takeru was stunned by the level of wealth he saw. The doorman welcomed them, and a group of servants opened the doors for them, leaving Takeru extremely pleased, as he had always dreamed of being received this way. Suddenly, an arrogant young girl ran toward them and threw herself at Takeru and B, asking, "Is this the little dragon? I expected it to look more sensible than this." She then brazenly declared that the dragon belonged to her. B became frightened and hid behind Takeru. Takeru told the girl that she was mistaken, but she replied arrogantly that dragons were noble creatures and that no one was more suitable than her to raise one. Takeru quickly realized that the girl was completely illogical, so he used scan on her and discovered that her name was Tiaris, that she was 14 years old, and that she was the Lord's daughter. Takeru decided to calm her down, sat in front of her, and asked why she believed she had the right to take the dragon. The girl answered awkwardly that her servant had told her that an adventurer owned a dragon, so it was natural for her to demand it, and that he had also instructed her to insult adventurers and act arrogantly. Takeru grew angry at the servant, but told Tiaris that B was his family and that no one had the right to separate them. Tiaris was shocked, and when B spoke to her, she realized that the dragon was not as foolish as she had thought. Suddenly, she began to cry and apologized to Takeru and B. Takeru tried to calm her, but B quickly hid behind him again. When Takeru asked why she wanted the dragon in the first place, she replied that she wanted to show it to her mother. At that moment, her father appeared. Takeru was shocked by his appearance, as he was much younger and more handsome than expected. The Lord welcomed them, invited them to drink tea, and apologized for his daughter's behavior. Cleiston went straight to the point and asked why they had been summoned. The Lord replied that it concerned his wife. Cleiston was shocked, and explained to Takeru that the Lord's wife had been ill for many years. The Lord confirmed this and said he had heard a rumor that Takeru had cured a severely ill person in a single day, and wished for him to help his wife. Takeru was frightened by the idea, as his magic was extremely powerful and had been the reason for Cleiston's transformation. The Lord added that Tiaris had wanted the dragon to place it beside her mother, hoping she might improve upon seeing a gentle creature. B began to cry, deeply moved, and Takeru was also greatly affected, agreeing to treat the lady with caution. They went to the lady's room, where Takeru found her extremely frail and pale. He asked the Lord if he could light the room, but she was sensitive to light. He examined her under dim illumination, and discovered that her body was filled with numerous illnesses, each severe enough to require its own hospital. He told the Lord that he could treat most of them, except for one condition called Ever poisoning, which he did not understand. After a brief silence, Takeru asked whether the Lord would trust him despite being a stranger. The lady herself was completely desperate, wishing only to hold her daughter in her arms once more. The Lord replied that he would trust Takeru no matter what happened. Takeru agreed, but stated that he would not use the same treatment method he had used on Cleiston, as it drained too much mana and could kill the lady in her current condition. He began with the gentlest approach, treating her eyes, which were sensitive to light, using a calm and minimal flow of mana, until she was able to open them and realize in amazement that her vision had greatly improved. After that, Takeru took out his staff and released an extremely powerful spell that purified the entire room and opened the windows, allowing light to enter without harming the lady. The lady cried from overwhelming joy. They entered the Lord's office, where Takeru informed him that his wife was suffering from evil poisoning. The Lord froze in place and immediately understood that this was deliberate poisoning, but what broke his heart was realizing that this poison had no known antidote. He remained standing, completely devastated. It turned out that evil poison was an extremely ancient toxin that people believed had disappeared, and no cure for it was currently known. Takeru said that since someone was still capable of producing this poison, there must also be someone who knew its composition, and that they should attempt to reconstruct the poison from the beginning in order to find an antidote. Cleiston said that they did not even know the ingredients used to make the poison. At that point, Belmonen had an idea, and explained that his ancestors had been somewhat obsessed with hobbies and had collected rare historical records and documents that might contain information on this matter. The problem was that most of those records were written in an ancient language that no one in this era could understand. Of course, this was not an obstacle for Takeru, who possessed a translation skill that allowed him to understand any language and convert it into Japanese instantly. Even though he did not know where to begin, he continued searching for any word related to poisons. In the end, he found a book containing information about the Aver plant. Strangely enough, the information was written in the diary of a person named Balara Bola, who had called himself the cutest adventurer in history. Takeru became completely absorbed and began reading while imitating the persona of a shy otaku teenager, until Cleiston quickly covered his mouth before he could say something headache-inducing. The diary stated that Balara Bola had found a large rock shaped like a Pegasus beside a massive lake, with shining golden flowers growing next to it. As soon as Takeru read this part, Cleiston said that he knew the place, and took out a map, showing them a lake at the edge of Belmonen's land with a large Pegasus statue, pointing out that the flower they sought might be there. The problem was that the location was far away, about 5 days by carriage. Takeru said that they would depart immediately, and Belmonen began preparing everything for them. Meanwhile, the personal servant whom Takeru had described as perverted watched them from afar and sent a message to an unknown individual. Before leaving, Takeru placed a magical protection stone in front of Lady Mulataria's room and told Belmonen that it would prevent anyone from harming her during their absence. At that moment, Tiaris ran up to him and apologized for her previous words. Takeru told her that her words had been very hurtful, but since she had realized her mistake on her own, that was enough. He told her that the most important skill she could learn in her life was to admit her mistakes and take time before acting. Tiaris promised him she would do so. After that, Takeru warned her that someone might try to manipulate her after they left, portraying him as a fraud or an evil person, and asked her, instead of believing anyone, to immediately go and inform her father. Afterward, Takeru and Cleiston mounted the unicorn and set off. Takeru cast spells to reduce weight and increase speed, causing the mount to run at insane speeds, allowing them to arrive faster than expected. As soon as they reached the place, Takeru was shocked. The village Cleiston had pointed out had once been prosperous, but now it was ruined and miserable. Takeru said that perhaps the lake had dried up, but Cleiston replied that it was too large to dry up. When they arrived, they found the lake in a horrifying state. The water was poisoned, and the trees around it were dead. Takeru examined the water and discovered that it was contaminated with granite buffalo poison, confirming to Cleiston that someone had deliberately poisoned the lake. Suddenly, the villagers appeared carrying sticks and knives, shouting in fear. Takeru saw their weakness and exhaustion, and spoke to them calmly, saying that he was an adventurer who had come to gather a rare plant. They did not believe him at first, but when Cleiston showed them his rank insignia, they immediately dropped their weapons and began telling their story. 10 months earlier, the lake had suddenly become polluted. The fish had died, the groundwater had been ruined, and there was no longer any food or drink. At that time, a merchant named Engash appeared and offered to save the village in exchange for a rare golden flower that bloomed beside the lake once every month. This flower was the village's greatest secret, but the people were dying and agreed. However, the water Engash supplied was only enough for drinking and not for farming, leaving them to live in hunger and ruin. Takeru told them that Engashi was a fraud, and that the timing of his appearance proved that he was the one who poisoned the lake to monopolize the flower. The villagers were shocked and refused to believe it at first, but Takeru explained the situation step by step until they began to understand the disaster. Takeru grew angry and said that he would bring down Engashi and expose his scheme himself, but first, he decided to help the villagers. After things finally calmed down, Takeru descended to the ground, cleansed the land with magic, repaired their houses, then took out a massive cauldron and cooked them an unparalleled hot meal. After eating, the village elder said he did not know how to thank him. Takaru only asked for permission to gather Ever flowers. The elder agreed, but before he could finish speaking, some children ran in and asked Takaru to come play with them. The elder told him to ignore them, but Takaru laughed and said he was happy to see them smiling. The children led Takaru to their secret hideout, which turned out to be a storage area where they threw away extremely bitter fruits. Though inside them was a simple nectar with a sweet taste, Takeru tried to use his skills on the fruit, but the screen appeared empty. However, he noticed the brown liquid dripping from it. He tasted it, and suddenly his mind opened wide. This taste, it's soy sauce. At the same time in Belmonent's palace, Tiaris heard the alarm device Takaru had installed. She rushed to her mother's room and found the personal servant Bernard standing inside. She was terrified and told him to step back, asking if he was trying to kill her mother. He pretended to be calm and asked who had said such a thing. When she told him about the alarm, Bernard began mocking Takeru, saying that adventurers were beggars and frauds, and that he must have done all this to steal from her father. Tiaris refused to listen to a single word and tried to defend Takeru, but Bernard played on the issue of trust, asking whether she would believe a newly arrived adventurer or a man who had served her family for years. The girl became confused and began to tremble. At that moment, the office door opened and Belmonent stepped in. He heard both sides and began to lean toward Bernard's words. Yet at the same time, he knew that Takaru had genuinely improved his wife Mulataria's condition. He decided to conduct a test, causing the servant to tense up badly. Belmonent said that the only way to know the truth was to have Bernard prove that he was not a traitor, and ordered him to drink from the special water he always brought to Mulataria. Bernard panicked and began to stammer. Belmonent suddenly splashed the water on him, and Bernard screamed that it was poisoned, but Belmonent drank it himself and said it was normal water, revealing that the real poison was in the cake Bernard always served to his wife. The guard seized him, and Belmonent found an encrypted letter in Bernard's room, realizing that someone powerful was behind the case. At the same time, Engache arrived at the village and knocked on the priest's door. One of the villagers opened and saw him, and the merchant said he had come to collect the flour early this time. The man tried to tell him that they would give him nothing because the flour was poisonous, but Engache had prepared a surprise. He immediately contacted his men and ordered them to finish everything quickly. Meanwhile, the village chief was leading Takeru and Cleiston through a hidden cave until they reached the place where the golden Ivor bloomed. Growing beside the Pegasus statue, Takeru was captivated by the beautiful sight before him. After a moment, he began analyzing the Ivor flowers and discovered that they only appeared on the shore of this specific lake because they were formed from the tears of a legendary beast named Hofalpnir. Takeru asked the chief about the legendary beast and learned that Hofalpnir was the Pegasus that had once protected the village from the lake's demons. From that day on, their ancestors began worshipping it as their guardian and leader, and all villagers preserved the story that Evor was born from its tears. Takeru asked whether he could take something of such great value, and the elder told him that as the village's savior, he could take whatever he wished. Takeru was delighted and picked only one flower, saying that it was enough to create an antidote. He then began thinking about experimenting with the soy sauce fruit, but his thoughts were interrupted by a nearby scream. Seconds later, one of the villagers came running toward them, gasping for breath and terrified, telling them that the village had been set ablaze by the merchant Angash. Takeru and Cleiston carried the chief and the other man on their backs and ran toward the village. When they arrived, they witnessed a horrifying scene. Every house was burning. Takaru wasted no time and began extinguishing the flames with B's help, while Cleiston rescued the villagers. They managed to control the situation quickly, but the houses had turned to ashes. The village guard reassured Takeru that no one had been seriously injured, which was the best news he could have heard. Takeru asked how the fire had started. The guard explained that Engache had come and demanded the Ivor flowers, and when the chief refused, knowing they were poisonous, Engash ordered his men to burn the village. Takaru was consumed with anger at the merchant's cruelty. At that moment, the chief panicked, realizing that the child Gonza was missing. Takaru immediately remembered the boy he had quickly grown attached to and suspected that Engache had kidnapped him. An elderly woman ran over and confirmed that Engache had indeed taken Gonza and headed toward the lake while people were fleeing the fire. Takeru's anger intensified as he activated his search skill to its maximum range and detected people inside a nearby abandoned fortress. He told Cleiston that Engache was accompanied by at least 100 thugs. Cleiston replied confidently that it was not a problem and mounted his unicorn. The chief tried to stop them, saying it was too dangerous, but Takaru reassured him that they were strong enough and promised to bring Gonza back safely. They reached the fortress, and Takeru sent B to scout the area, where she found the entire gang celebrating. Takeru began thinking of a plan, but Cleiston was on the verge of transforming into a dragon from sheer rage, unable to tolerate the kidnapping of a child and celebrating it with a feast. Takeru tried to calm him down, telling him that attacking without a plan could put Gonza in danger. After that, an idea came to him, and he cast a concealment spell on himself and Cleiston. In this way, they managed to pass the drunken guards with ease, even bumping into one who was heading to refill his drink. Cleiston felt as though the entire gang was above their heads, so Takaru decided that they should remain hidden for as long as possible while dealing with them. Cleiston noticed Takaru walking around collecting everything inside the fortress, and Takaru told him that he was gathering evidence of the gang's crimes. They continued searching for Gonza, but found no trace of him, even after checking every room. Cleiston said that they needed to confront the merchant himself to find out where the child was, and Takaru agreed. They reached the room where Engash and his men were holding their celebration. They heard one of them laughing about how pitiful the villagers had looked as they watched their homes burn. Another said that he wished they had known the location of the flowers sooner, and a third, speaking arrogantly, said that it did not matter because they had kidnapped Gonza for that very purpose. He then began explaining their wicked plan. Once news spread that the wife of a wealthy man like Belmonte had died from ever poison, people would panic and begin buying the poison to kill their enemies, allowing them to raise the price however they wished. The moment he finished speaking, a bottle struck the back of his head and knocked him down. The one who hit him was Engash himself, reminding them that the plan was secret. Takaru and Cleiston heard everything, and Cleiston said he could no longer restrain himself. Takaru told him to do as he pleased, but not to kill anyone outright. Cleiston cancelled the concealment, smashed the door open, and chaos erupted among the gang. Cleiston began striking them left and right, while Engash panicked and ordered one of them to bring their secret weapon, even though it was not yet under their control. At that moment, Takaru appeared beside Engash and told him that they needed to move the child away first. Engash immediately remembered one of his men and revealed Gonza's location without thinking. When he turned around, Takaru was already gone. Takaru ran toward the storage room where Gonza was held. There, he found a single thug who was bored because he was the only one working while the others were celebrating. B said she would handle it, and Takaru agreed. The small dragon flew at him, dragged him toward the door, and knocked him down. Takaru entered, calling Gonza's name, and the child responded immediately. Takaru broke the lock with his bare hand and freed him, and Gonza ran toward him in terror. Takaru told him to return to the village at once, but as soon as they stepped outside, they found the entire gang fleeing in panic. He saw tentacles emerging from above the fortress walls and was almost certain this was not Cleiston. He grabbed one of the gang members and questioned him, and the man said that the lake monster had attacked them. Takaru did not fully believe him, but decided to see for himself. Takaru asked Gonza if he could run back to the village on his own, but the child was too frightened to leave him. Takaru told him to hold on tightly and ran toward the battle area while forming a protective barrier around himself. He found that the monster fighting Cleiston was a gigantic sea snail. He scanned it with his appraisal skill and discovered that it was a rank B monster called the Black Anemone, and that Engashe was the one who had corrupted it. Takaru turned toward Engash, who was lying on the ground in terror, begging anyone to save him. Takaru wished he could leave him as food for the monster, but when it attacked him, Takaru created a barrier and prevented his death, deciding to capture him alive and interrogate him later. He told Cleiston that they needed to finish things quickly, as Cleiston was struggling against the endless tentacles. Takaru said he would make things easier. He used powerful ice magic and froze the monster in place. Cleiston was amazed, but Takaru told him that they still needed to destroy its brain to kill it. Cleiston threw a powerful punch, but the blow triggered a defensive mechanism, causing the tentacles to harden and surge toward Takaru, who had no time to form a barrier. He tried to block with his staff, but the force sent Takaru and Gonza flying over the fortress wall. Takaru held on to Gonza and threw him upward so that B could catch him, while he himself fell into the poisoned lake. He began to drown and thought that this was the end, that he had sacrificed himself so as not to leave anyone in danger. It did not make him sad, but he was sorrowful that he would not be able to do all the things he wanted, especially cooking soy sauce dishes, and receiving the scissors he had not yet obtained. Suddenly, the black-haired ruler sensed him and decided to help, as Takaru was doing good in this world. Yet Takaru was still thinking about food and scissors, while someone kept calling out to him and receiving no answer. Growing impatient, the caller pulled him out of the water. Takaru was shocked to see that the one who saved him was a Pegasus. She told him not to die on her like that and introduced herself as Hofalpnir. Takaru recognized the name, though he could not recall where he had heard it. He spoke to her, asking whether this was her home and apologizing for falling into it. She replied that it was the opposite, that it was a good thing, because the lake's waters had suddenly begun to purify and the plants had returned to life. Takaru could not believe it, so Hofvalpnir explained that the reason lay in the past decline of the magical element within the lake, which had caused her to weaken greatly. With the last of her strength, she had created the Ever flowers to purify the lake, but doing so turned her own body into stone. The flowers remained alive, yet Engash polluted the lake once again. When Takaru fell into the water, he absorbed the poison, and by doing so, he released her from her petrified state. She returned him to his companions and told them that a Pegasus sorceress had saved him, though no one could see her except Takaru. She thanked him and then disappeared. They returned to the village and reunited Gonza with his family. After that, Takaru formed a magic circle using stones and asked Clayston to step inside with him. Clayston was uneasy, yet trusted him. Takaru activated the circle and instantly transported them to Belmonent's palace. There he quickly created the antidote, and muleteria was cured after a single sip. Everyone wept with joy, but Takaru was not finished yet. He returned to the village that was being rebuilt, and informed the chief that Engache had been handed over to the ruler, along with all the evidence, and that he would never leave prison again. The chief cried and asked how they could ever repay him. Takaru smiled, brought him boiled potatoes topped with butter and soy sauce, and asked him to taste them. Instantly, the man was struck speechless by the incredible flavor. Takaru then presented his business idea, asking the chief to sell all the soy sauce fruits they possessed, and to use the money to expand the fields cultivating those fruits. The elder agreed, though he said they would not be able to use all of the harvest. Takaru revealed that he intended to make soy sauce famous in the major cities, after which it would become the village's signature product. Thus, he had everyone try the potatoes with butter and soy sauce, and then he set off on his way. Later, Takaru and Clayston gathered and walked together while discussing the mission, when Hofalpnir suddenly descended before them. Takaru was surprised to see her, but was even more shocked when she transformed into a beautiful girl and declared that she would now join his team. Both Takaru and Clayston were bewildered by her words. Clayston asked why a Pegasus sorceress would want to travel with a mad human. Hofalpnir replied that she had stayed in one place for far too long and now wished to explore the world, feeling that it would be fun to stay with Takaru. In return, she enthusiastically agreed to let him ride her as a mount. Takaru felt that his troubles would only increase from that moment onward. After that, Takaru returned to the city and went to the blacksmith to discuss the scissors he had requested. The master blacksmith told him that thanks to the aldrite ore Takaru had brought, he had won the sword forging competition and could now devote all his time to creating the greatest scissors in the world. Takaru left the shop extremely happy and found Hofalpnir waiting for him. She asked whether he had gotten what he wanted, and Takaru replied that the blacksmith would need some time. Hofalpnir complained and said she might hit him to make him work faster. Takaru asked her not to hit anyone, and she agreed, abandoning the idea, then demanded potatoes with butter and soy sauce. Takaru told her that she had already eaten some, but Hofalpnir said that was in the past and began competing with B over who could eat more potatoes. Takaru immediately regretted bringing her along. At that moment, Frey arrived from the guild and invited Takaru to a meeting. There, he informed him about the material gathering competition organized by the guild every year and asked him to participate. Hofalpnir showed interest in the competition, but Takaru told Frey that he preferred to stick to ordinary gathering missions. However, Frey and Ariana explained that Lord Belmonent himself had requested Takaru's participation, and since he was the official sponsor of the competition, they had to comply. Realizing he could not refuse the local lord's request, Takaru agreed to participate, greatly delighting Frey and Ariana. A few days later, the competition began, and the guildmaster explained the rules to all the excited adventurers. He displayed an image of the Belmonent family, and said that the lord wished to surprise his recently recovered wife and therefore wanted the adventurers to find a 7-colored rainbow sheep. All the adventurers grew eager, but Takaru felt uneasy, as he had never heard of such a material before. The guild master explained that this 7-colored wool was extremely rare, and that each participant had to research it beforehand, but was forbidden from seeking help from others. The competition was meant to test each adventurer's gathering ability, and everyone was a rival. He instructed them to go to the library for information, and to rent horses or carriages if needed, while strictly prohibiting cooperation with companions. Clayston understood that no one could accompany Takaru, and suggested using a teleportation spell to find the rainbow sheep quickly, but Takaru refused, wanting to compete fairly and avoid complaints if he won. He also said that he would not take B with him. B began crying and begging to go along, but Takaru told him it was against the competition rules. B refused to accept this and kept sulking until Hofalpnir gently hugged him, causing him to fall asleep within seconds. Takaru was surprised and asked how she did it. Hofalpnir replied that she had converted her mana into nourishment for the small dragon, who fell asleep once he was full. She assured Takaru that she would take care of him and told him to focus on the competition. Takaru thanked her, rushed to the library, and used his magic to quickly find information about rainbow sheep. After that, he ran toward the mountain where the sheep were said to live. Takaru arrived swiftly thanks to his great speed, but suddenly remembered B and grew worried, as it was the first time he had been apart from him, and he also worried about B's tendency to overeat when stressed. It turned out that B was indeed eating excessively because he missed Takaru. Hofalpnir told him not to be depressed and began boasting that she was faster than him. B grew angry and started arguing with her, while she refused to stop. Clayston told them both to knock it off and told Hofalpnir that she did not need to prove her speed to anyone because she was already the fastest, which made the Pegasus sorceress very happy. After that, Clover praised B's agility as he flew through the sky and calmed him down after they finished eating in good spirits. Clover thanked Takeru for advising him to praise them whenever they argued. Takeru set up a camp for the night, and the next morning he reached the base of the mountain. He found a herd of rainbow sheep grazing there. The book he had read in the library said they were fast and difficult to catch, so he began thinking of a way to approach them. Suddenly, an idea came to him, and he started making loud sheep noises. The foolish sheep thought he was one of them and came closer. Takeru asked if he could take some wool and lifted one sheep into his arms. He found it cute and brushed some of its fur. The rest of the sheep approached to receive the same treatment. While Takeru was gathering the wool, the other adventurers arrived and witnessed a scene far beyond their expectations. After that, Takeru returned to the camp with more wool than required. Suddenly, a dragon flew overhead, reminding him of B, who must have been missing him greatly. Takeru ran back to the city, where B rushed toward him and soaked his clothes with tears and mucus. The other adventurers were present, and the guildmaster announced that Takeru was the winner, as he was the fastest and had brought back the largest amount of wool. Takeru felt that he could finally rest, but the guildmaster had other plans. He invited him to his office and told him that they had decided to grant him the FB rank. He explained that the guild now recognized Takeru as a versatile adventurer who could take all types of missions, and that with the FB classification, his pay would depend on the rank of each mission. Takeru was pleased as he would be able to take small missions from old clients at low prices, but Grit shocked him by explaining that payment would change if the quality of the materials he brought differed from what was required. He told Takeru that if he continued bringing high-grade materials and selling them cheaply, he would disrupt the market. Grit, the bear, said that he only wanted to ensure Takeru received proper compensation for his work as an adventurer. Takeru felt embarrassed. Grit told him that everyone wanted him to be paid fairly. He asked Takeru whether he would accept the promotion. Takeru thought about how it might affect the people around him. Clover told him to stop overthinking and accept the promotion proudly. Even Hafalpanir wanted him to take the unique rank that suited someone unique like him. After a brief moment of thought, Takeru agreed, and Grit handed him the badge symbolizing his new rank. At that moment, Ariana rushed into the room with urgent news. She told them that the forest worm was heading toward the main road and would reach the city soon. Grit realized that ordinary adventurers would not be able to stop it and asked Takeru and his team to take the mission. They agreed gladly. They reached the forest and waited for the forest worm, but were shocked when they saw how enormous the monster was, unsure how they could defeat it. Suddenly, Takeru heard a familiar voice. It turned out to be the elf girl, Brolight, riding atop the massive forest worm. Everyone was pleasantly surprised to see her. Brolight jumped down and ran toward Takeru, saying she had wanted to meet him again. Without noticing, Takeru tried to use a cleansing spell on her. When he asked why she was riding such a large monster, Brolight said she needed a favor from it and had decided to bring him a gift. She thought she understood that he wanted to ride something, so she had brought her friend Kalem from her homeland specifically for him. Takeru immediately cast a cleansing spell on the beast, which sank into the ground because it disliked being cleaned. Takeru thanked Brolight for the gift, but said he would not be able to ride something that large. Brolight suggested that he might like a white unicorn instead, but Havalpnir replied that a unicorn was basically just an ordinary horse, and that Takeru did not need anyone else since he already had her. Brolight asked about the new member of the team, and Takeru invited her to drink with them so he could tell her the long story. They arrived at the tavern, and Takeru told Brolight what had happened after she left. He explained how he and Clover formed a team, how the Lord summoned them, how they reached the lake, and how they met the flying sorceress who transformed into a girl and joined the team. Brolight was not surprised at all, and asked Takeru if she could join the team as well. Takeru said he had intended to invite her anyway, and was happy to have her. The elf girl showed them her golden guild ring, and said she had been promoted to rank E after their last meeting. Clover was impressed and invited her to a training match someday, which Brolight accepted gladly. After that, Hafalpnir said that the purity of Brolight's spirit was very comforting to her, and that she was about to share a secret, but Brolight asked her to postpone it. Hafalpnir chose to remain silent, understanding that Brolight wanted to reveal the secret to her companions herself. Brolight told Takeru that if he accepted her mission, she would reveal everything immediately. Takeru asked her to tell him everything now, as he had been waiting for her for a long time. Brolight explained that her sister Lodi had run away from the village and that she wanted Takeru to search for her. She explained that Lodi was the village priestess and was supposed to bear the next lord's heir, marry, and have children, but she had fled instead. Takeru realized that he had become entangled in the middle of a major political drama. She continued, saying that Lodi had always insisted she would not marry someone she did not love and had set a condition for marriage, a beautiful Pegasus. However, by the time Brolight returned with the mount, her sister had already disappeared. Brolight believed that Takeru, with his many spells, could find her. After hearing the entire story, Takeru was unsure whether he should return Lodi to a village that wanted her to marry a stranger. Brolight clarified that she did not want to force her sister back but that she was hurt. Lodi had left without telling her anything and only wanted to know her reasons. Takeru decided to help her, and everyone was ready to go with her. Takeru decided to begin the search from the elf village. Brolight led them into the forest and told them that once the forest reached certain conditions, she would be able to open a path to the elf village. She told Takeru that it was merely a mechanical spell, which made him wonder whether it was similar to his own teleportation magic. Suddenly, Hofvalpnir told them that they would be faster if they rode her. She immediately transformed into her horse form and began acting like Gojo Satoru, declaring that, in heaven and on earth, she alone was the fastest. Takeru and the others witnessed this display, and Hofvalpnir carried them to the middle of the forest in a very short time. There, Brolight summoned the river sorceress to open a path to the elf village, and a black vortex appeared before her. She asked everyone to touch the vortex to travel to the village, demonstrating it herself as she disappeared into it. Takeru was shocked by what he saw, but Clayston and B were not as timid as he was and entered the vortex. When only Takeru and Hofvalpnir remained, she asked him to keep an eye on Brolight, warning that she hid a dark secret behind her bright personality. The thought weighed heavily on Takeru, but Hofvalpnir was confident that he could easily save Brolight. With that, Hofvalpnir vanished into the vortex, and Takeru followed her nervously. When Takeru opened his eyes after passing through the vortex, he saw the beautiful and enchanting land of the elves. Suddenly, B and the others arrived searching for him. They were all dirty and complained about how worried they had been when he did not appear on time, while Takeru thought that only a few seconds had passed for him. He decided to clean them first. Suddenly, an arrow was aimed at him and nearly missed. Arrows began raining down in large numbers, so Takeru formed a barrier around his team. Brolight recognized that the arrows were coming from her own village. At that moment, the archers appeared and scolded her, asking how she dared enter their lands. Takeru recalled Hofvalpnir's words about Brolight's dark side and began wondering what it truly was. The archers continued to reprimand Brolight, demanding to know how she dared bring outsiders into their territory. Brolight tried to speak, but an arrogant elf interrupted her, declaring that no one would trust her and that her lowly companions had no right to set foot on this land. This angered Hofvalpnir greatly. She stepped out of the barrier with a terrifying gaze and asked the elf whether he had just called her lowly. Enraged by her power, dark clouds covered the sky. Hofvalpnir asked how he dared describe a sorceress like her as lowly, then transformed into her true form. The elves were stunned by the sight. Hofvalpnir then called for aerial support from Hofvalpnir's power itself and targeted them all. When the elves stood again, their hair strangely styled, they fell to their knees begging Hofvalpnir for forgiveness. She mocked them, saying that the elves were truly in danger if they could not even recognize her power. Takeru was surprised to realize that when Hofvalpnir was in her horse form, only those with sufficient mana could hear her, yet all the elves were able to speak with her without issue. After that, the arrogant elf asked Hofvalpnir why she had come to their kingdom. Takeru introduced himself and answered the question. The elves did not welcome him warmly and demanded that he identify himself properly. Takeru introduced himself and his team, and the elf remarked that he had an important member in his party. The arrogant elf was moved upon seeing that Takeru was a comprehensive adventurer. He introduced himself as Lil and offered to guide them to the village. Along the way, Hofvalpnir told Takeru that she felt something deeply unsettling in the forest, though she could not identify it. Takeru and the others were amazed by the forest's enchanting beauty, but Clayston noticed that the mana in the air was impure, making it difficult to breathe. Lil told them that they must be cleansed before entering the village, and Takeru decided to take responsibility. He used a cleansing spell on everyone, and surprisingly, he used far more magic than usual. Everyone was purified and felt pure mana return around them. Lil was shocked and asked Takeru how he had done it, while Takeru himself did not understand why the spell had suddenly become so powerful. The greater question remained: why was the mana so densely concentrated around the village? Takeru thought it might be connected to the massive tree before them. They walked along a path formed by branches surrounding the great tree. Brolight explained that the tree was the symbol of all elves and that noble elves lived within it. She said that only noble elves and those with permission were allowed to enter the village. Everyone then understood that Brolight was, in fact, a noble elf. She nervously admitted it and apologized, but Takeru did not understand why everyone was so concerned. Brolight explained that noble elves were forbidden from leaving their village and placed their bloodline and laws above everything else. Takeru asked whether people died if they left the village, and Brolight said no. Takeru replied that in that case it was fine, because people should break some rules when precious things were at risk. Brolight was surprised by his kindness. Takeru told her that following rules could be right, but old laws made life difficult when they were not adjusted over time. Brolight was deeply affected by his words, but Hofvalpnir decided to mock elf society in general, saying that noble elves were narrow-minded and believed their village was the entire world, and that she disliked the river sorcerers for obeying the same mindset. Seeing Brolight distressed, Takeru hugged her, and she began to cry upon realizing how much her friends cared about her. She then led them to the noble elf palace within the World Tree. A beautiful maid greeted them immediately and welcomed them. Brolight asked her to arrange a meeting with her elder brother. While waiting, Takeru tried the elf tea, which reminded him of matcha tea. Orkesto, Brolight's brother, arrived soon after. Takeru noticed that he had not received adequate nourishment in childhood, which was why his body still looked youthful. Brolight ran to hug him, but Orkesto avoided her, fearing she might accidentally crush him. Afterward, Brolight introduced her friends to her brother and revealed that he was the ruler here, asking them to dispense with formalities. He then greeted Hofalpnir with full respect. Takeru kept staring at the small-statured elf, and Orkesto noticed and asked whether he wanted to know why noble elves were so short. Takeru confirmed, and Orkesto explained that a cursed bloodline ran through the family, which was the cause. Brolight became upset and began to cry, saying that she wanted to break the curse. Takeru was extremely flustered, but Orkesto told him not to mind his younger sibling, a statement that nearly stunned Takeru, as Brolight identified herself as female while possessing traits of both genders. Takeru could not understand it, but Clayston found it reasonable, as such things were normal among lizard men. After that, Orkesto asked the guests to rest during their stay in the village. Before leaving, Takeru asked about the strange concentration of mana around the village. Orkesto was surprised that Takeru had noticed and told him that the mana density had increased over the past 6 months, coinciding with the time Takeru had found B. Takeru asked for permission to try something that might help the situation, and Orkesto agreed. They went to the balcony, where Takeru created a large mana stone, astonishing Orkesto. The guards asked him to stop, warning it could be dangerous, but Orkesto trusted Takeru. When Takeru asked him to place his hand on the stone and activate it, Orkesto did so without hesitation. When the stone activated, it flew high above the elf village and emitted a green light that reduced the mana concentration, allowing everyone to breathe easily. Seeing this, Orkesto realized that Takeru was the person mentioned in the village's prophecy, and immediately knelt before him. He asked Takeru to accompany them to a secret place containing an ancient prophecy stone. The prophecy spoke of a catastrophic drought that would afflict the elves after their blood weakened, but foretold that a person of different blood would soon appear and restore life to the land. Takeru and Orkesto began analyzing the prophecy that spoke of the extinction of the noble dwarves. Takeru understood that the different blood mentioned might belong to someone from outside the royal lineage, and for a brief moment, he felt that it could possibly be him. That evening, Brolight enjoyed the cool breeze after the mana concentration had finally weakened. When Takeru approached her and asked about the curse of the dwarves, she was taken by surprise. A maid stepped forward and volunteered to explain everything. She said that the curse was a mysterious illness that had appeared among the dwarves generations ago, preventing their bodies from developing naturally. Around 50 years earlier, the situation had suddenly worsened. Newborn children no longer survived long, and it began to feel as if the entire race had been condemned. The maid broke down in tears, admitting that no one knew the origin of the curse, then collapsed to the ground crying as she confessed that she herself had lost a child to it. Brolight moved to comfort her, while Takeru quietly began thinking about what kind of curse could cause such devastation. The following day, Orkesto led Takeru to meet his mother, the Queen of the Dwarves. The queen immediately noticed the aura surrounding Takeru and remarked that it was extremely unusual. Before Takeru could ask anything, she noticed B and instantly understood that he was an ancient young dragon who had chosen Takeru as someone worthy of traveling alongside him. This, she explained, was the source of his unique aura. B happily agreed with her assessment, while Takeru worried that his reaction might be inappropriate, but the queen reassured him that it was perfectly normal. She thanked Takeru for purifying the polluted mana that had affected their kingdom, yet he told her there was more they needed to discuss. He asked whether the land had shaken 6 months earlier, around the time the mana concentration began to rise. The queen confirmed it, explaining that the earthquake had been so violent it even altered the river's course. Takeru suggested that the quake might have awakened a certain creature, disrupting the flow of mana throughout all dwarven lands. The queen bowed deeply and asked him to deal with the matter, and Takeru promised to do everything in his power. He then added that there was an even more dangerous issue they needed to discuss. Shortly afterward, Takeru returned to his companions and told them that he had spoken with the queen about a very serious matter. Everyone waited eagerly for the details. Takeru then stated that the different blood mentioned in the prophecy was not his. Confusion spread across their faces, so Takeru activated a magic device that prevented sound from escaping, as what he was about to say was extremely shocking. He revealed that he had examined the bodies of the queen, Orkesto, and the maid, and had discovered genetic abnormalities. Brolight was stunned before she could even grasp what that meant. Takeru explained that a genetic abnormality meant the physical blueprint inherited from their ancestors had become corrupted. Clayston asked why such a thing had happened in the first place. To reach the answer, Takeru asked Brolight about the maid's husband and learned that he was her twin brother. Takeru concluded that the curse afflicting the noble dwarves could be described as a severe form of bloodline degeneration. He explained to Brolight that the noble dwarves had tried to preserve their blood by marrying within the same lineage, and that anyone with even basic knowledge of biology would understand how dangerous that was. He told them that the solution was simple: introducing external DNA into the noble bloodline to prevent further degeneration. Brolight was overwhelmed with emotion and began crying in relief, having realized that the solution was far simpler than she had imagined, and that once applied, no more children would be born suffering as she had. She continued to cry as Takeru hurried to comfort her. Clayston then asked an important question: how would they convince the dwarves to marry outside their bloodline? Brolight replied that her mother and brother would listen to Takeru, but she was unsure about the rest. Takeru asked Hvalpnir whether she could issue an order that would force the dwarves to listen, but she refused. She said she had no obligation toward the dwarves, and if they were on the verge of extinction, it was not her concern. She declared that a sorceress was impartial toward all creatures, then asked Takeru whether he intended to save every soul he encountered. He replied that he would help any friend, because that was simply the right thing to do. Hvalpnir called him too kind, yet agreed to help in her own way. Instead of acting directly, she told Brolight that they needed to find the river sorceress Lil, because Lil's cloned form held far greater influence over the dwarves who obeyed her. She then told Brolight to stop crying, as the leader had already heard her. Turning to Takeru, she said that since he was asking a favor from the leader, he needed to be prepared to pay the price. When Takeru nervously asked what she wanted, it turned out she only demanded 10 potatoes with oil and soy sauce. Soon after, Hvalpnir and B flew into the sky to search for the river sorceress Lil, while Takeru and the others waited anxiously in the forest. They returned quickly, reporting that they had found no trace of Lil, which deeply disappointed everyone. Brolight was especially shaken, unable to believe that the guardian sorceress had vanished when they needed her most. Clayston reasoned that the unusually heavy mana in the area meant something was seriously wrong, and that this might explain the sorceress's disappearance. Takeru told Brolight that this was not the time for despair, and that they needed more information before taking any action. When he asked whether there was an adventurers guild nearby, she replied that they had the Demos Guild. Clayston was shocked and told Takeru that the Demos Guild was one of the most prestigious guilds on the entire continent. Takeru was pleased by this and immediately decided that they would head there at once. When they arrived at the Demos Guild, which turned out to be nothing more than a small hut deep in the forest, Clayston praised it even more, saying it could be called the best guild on the continent because it possessed the highest average adventurer rank. Yet its interaction with the outside world was minimal, earning it the nickname the Ghost Guild. Takeru began to feel optimistic, thinking that the guild might allow him to learn more about rare materials. The group entered the guild building, where they were welcomed by the Magister Lobel Sahra. She said she had heard a great deal about Takeru and Clayston, and had wanted to meet them once she learned they were in the city. Suddenly, Lobel Sahra grabbed Brolight's hand in an overly dramatic manner, saying she had been terribly worried about her. Brolight reassured her that she was fine, but Lobel Sahra continued flirting without restraint. Takeru quietly stepped away, as the scene was becoming too much for him. He noticed Clayston examining the quest board and remarked that there were no particularly strange requests, despite all the odd events occurring around the area. When Takeru looked at the board himself, he found many gathering quests. One item immediately caught his attention: cat ear mushrooms. Lobel Sahra explained that they were delicious even when eaten raw, and that they glowed faintly in the dark. She pointed out their location, but warned that the recent increase in mana density had made them difficult to collect. Both Takeru and Clayston realized they needed to investigate that area, as it might hold clues to the ongoing disturbances. Brolight decided to guide them, claiming she knew the place well. That night, Takeru prepared a new potion. B asked what he was making, and Takeru explained that it was a special dose he had brewed as a precaution against anything unexpected. The next morning, they returned to the guild, where Lobel Sahra handed them a stack of quests, all requesting cat ear mushrooms. She thanked Takeru, saying demand for the mushrooms had risen sharply, and he promised to bring back the highest quality possible. However, she expressed concern when she noticed the team lacked heavy equipment, warning that the journey would take several days. Takeru simply replied that it would not be a problem. The entire team mounted Hvalpnir's back. Brolight gave directions, telling her to head north until a large lake came into view, as their destination lay beside it. They flew for a while until the lake appeared. Takeru felt excited at the thought of discovering new materials there, but Hofvalpnir soon warned him that the mana in the air was growing increasingly heavy as they approached. Without hesitation, Takaru gave the potion he had prepared to Clayston and Brolite, explaining that it would help them withstand the dense mana inside the cave they were heading toward. Suddenly, Hofvalpnir spotted a cave ahead, and Brolite confirmed it was the one containing the mushrooms. Yet something felt wrong. When they landed near the cave, they found numerous monsters lying dead on the ground. As they watched the corpses lose all color and turn completely pale, Brolite grew uneasy and asked the others to wait while she examined the cave. Takeru told her to stop, but she ignored him and suddenly collapsed to the ground, unable to breathe. Alarmed, Clayston rushed to help her. Takeru tried to stop him, but it was too late. Clayston was also affected by the dense mana pouring from the cave. Seeing his companions struggling to breathe, Takeru raised his staff and cast a cleansing spell, reducing the mana concentration in the air. As a result, the darkened remains of the monsters vanished completely, and Brolite and Clayston were finally able to breathe normally again. Takeru felt relieved that he had saved them, but Hofvalpnir warned him that the heavy mana would soon return. He immediately instructed his companions to activate the magic tool he had given them. When they did, a golden light enveloped them, shielding them from the dense mana around them. Everyone now understood that the source of the mana concentration lay inside the cave, and that it was what had killed the monsters. Takeru knew he himself was immune to mana density, yet he remained concerned about Clayston and Brolite, wondering whether they would truly be safe even with the tool. He realized he had not prepared a magic device for Hofvalpnir, and asked her to wait a moment so he could make one. She replied calmly, "I don't need one." In the next instant, she transformed into her human form, much smaller than before. Everyone was stunned by the sight. But Hofvalpnir explained that this size allowed her to remain within the range of the magic tool. She climbed onto Clayston's shoulder and told him to move. Thus, the team entered the dark cave. Takaru illuminated the interior with magic, and Brolite instructed everyone to stay close to her so they would not lose their way. As they moved deeper inside, Brolite said the place emitted a deeply unsettling feeling, and that everything within the cave consisted of nothing but the remains of dead monsters. Suddenly, they encountered a strange insect-type monster. Clayston was shocked to see a creature capable of surviving such dense mana. Brolite admitted she had never seen this creature before and attempted to examine it, but the monster spat a lethal acid toward her, forcing her to retreat immediately. Clayston concluded that the creature must have adapted to the new conditions and warned everyone to remain cautious. Moments later, the team realized they were being surrounded by more of the same horrifying insect-like monsters. One of them lunged at Takaru, who decided he would not back down. He coated his fist with magic and struck the creature away, continuing to smash through the others in his path. Clayston joined the fight, killing a monster that tried to attack him from behind, while B unleashed a burst of flames, burning several of the creatures. Even so, the number of monsters was overwhelming. Takaru decided to deal with them all at once before the battle dragged on any longer. He asked Brolite whether there was an open space deeper inside the cave. She replied that there was a wide area ahead. Brolite immediately ran toward it, and the others followed. The monsters chased after them as well, but fortunately, Takaru and the others reached the open space just in time. Seeing the creatures closing in, Takaru ordered everyone to stay close to him to avoid being caught in the crossfire. He waited until the monsters came close enough, then deployed a powerful barrier that expanded in all directions, annihilating every creature the moment it touched them. When the attack ended, all the monsters vanished, leaving behind only scattered remains. Despite this, Clayston felt uneasy, as Takeru had used excessive force, causing the cave's ceiling to crack open. Even so, they temporarily ignored the damage, sat down, and shared a pleasant meal, chatting happily about how true enjoyment in life came from eating in places like this. Refocusing, Takaru asked Brolite, "Does this cave go?" She replied that they had reached roughly the midpoint between the entrance and the altar located at the very end of the cave. Clayston asked whether the altar was meant for worshipping the river witch Lil. Brolite, looking uncertain, said she did not know. The altar was extremely ancient, and even the elves did not know who it truly belonged to, but its design and engravings clearly did not match those associated with Lil. Takeru began thinking carefully, suspecting that if the altar was not meant for worship, then it might have been constructed to imprison something instead. They resumed their journey, and to their surprise, no insect monsters appeared along the way this time. Clayston urged everyone to stay alert, as he sensed something ominous. Suddenly, Brolite announced that they had reached the altar, standing beyond the arch ahead. Passing through the arch, the team entered a vast hall. At its far end stood the ancient altar Brolite had mentioned. It looked less like a place of worship, and more like a magical fortress, covered in unfamiliar runes that Takaru had never seen before. At its center rested a massive block of black stone, radiating the dense mana that filled the entire cave. Takaru examined the altar using his appraisal skill, but his magic screen displayed only a single message: sealed entity, containment system failing. His suspicions were confirmed. Something was sealed inside the altar, and the increasing mana density was the result of the containment system nearing collapse. Speaking calmly, Takaru said, "I found the source of the dense mana. This altar isn't for worship, it's a prison. Something is sealed inside and the containment system is failing. That's why mana has been flooding the area around the village." As the team prepared to approach, Brolight suddenly heard a faint sound, but at that moment, a drop of acid fell onto Brolight's clothes, giving him the answer. He immediately formed a stronger sphere of light above them, revealing a gigantic snail clinging to the ceiling of the cave. Once it realized it had been discovered, the creature descended, fully revealing its enormous form before Takaru and his companions. Everyone prepared for battle at once. Takaru read the information on the creature. It was an S-rank monster, evolved specifically to live inside the cave. Every part of its body was poisonous, even to Takaru, and its only weakness was fire. His companions were shocked by this revelation. Clayston said he had once heard of a black poisonous snail that had destroyed an entire kingdom by itself. Brolight told Takaru that they could not defeat it alone, and insisted they should escape, but he refused. He explained that they could not leave because a massive treasure lay ahead of them. Moreover, if they fled now, they would find no clues regarding the witch Lil. Retreating from an enemy they could defeat was not the right choice. When Brolight asked how they could possibly win, Takaru calmly answered that its weakness was fire, and that this was B's specialty. He signaled Clayston to join the fight, and Clayston immediately transformed into his dragon form. Brolight complained that she should have been told about this form earlier, then admitted she would not be able to help directly, and would instead cheer them on. Hofvalpnir chose to stay behind and fight alongside her companions. Takeru instantly erected a protective magic barrier around Brolight, then cast enhancement spells to lighten their bodies before telling them to unleash everything they had. B flew forward and attacked the snail with a fireball. The snail retaliated with its tentacles, but B skillfully dodged every strike. At the same time, Clayston rushed in from the creature's blind spot, only for the snail to detect him and bind him with its tentacles. The tentacles were not strong enough to restrain him, and Clayston tore them apart with brute force, shouting proudly that he would cut the monster down with his spear. He charged forward and severed several tentacles, but they regenerated instantly. B attempted another breath of fire, but the snail counterattacked and knocked him away. Takeru asked Brolight, "How can it fight two opponents at once without having eyes?" That question led him to the answer. A monster evolved to live in a dark cave had no need for vision. He realized that the antennae on the creature's head were its sensory organs and instructed Brolight to target them. Brolight dashed forward to attack while Takeru blasted away the tentacles reaching for her. She leapt and sliced through the antennae, causing the snail's movements to slow dramatically. B struck it with another fire attack, but even that failed to cause significant damage. Hope began to fade, as even fire could not penetrate the creature's damp skin. This forced Takaru to recall a traditional method for dealing with snails in his old world. He pulled out a container of high-quality salt from his bag. Salt absorbed moisture from a snail's body and killed it quickly. Though unhappy to waste salt on anything other than cooking, he formed it into small projectiles and hurled them. The snail's flesh began to melt immediately. The creature attempted to flee, but Clayston cut it down with his spear, killing it instantly. Takeru celebrated their victory, but Hofvalpnir told them to look up. The cave walls were covered with countless black snail eggs, and some had already begun to hatch. Takeru wondered how they could destroy them before they turned into monsters as dangerous as their mother. He checked the eggs' description and discovered that they would die when exposed to sunlight, and that they also held high value as alchemical materials. He immediately ordered everyone to cover their eyes, then created a small artificial sun inside the cave, instantly destroying all the snail eggs. However, while he believed that their problems had ended, he felt a powerful surge of mana once again. Hofvalpnir told him that the next opponent was the King of Darkness, and then suddenly, a dark entity with a strange form appeared. Takeru told Laudakar that they had come together with her sister to help solve the dilemma of the curse. Laudakar was startled as soon as she heard this. She eagerly asked him whether he had found a solution to the problem. Takeru answered that he was still investigating the matter. He added that he hoped to find a solution soon. After that, the villagers decided to invite Takeru and his friends to a lavish dinner feast. Takeru sat and ate with his companions. After the dinner ended, Takeru went outside and sat alone. Laudakar followed him and told him that it was their custom to welcome any guest who visited their village. Laudakar was carrying her young daughter and presented her to Takeru. It is revealed that she had married one of the common elves and gave birth to this child. She confirmed to Takeru that her daughter was healthy. She also confirmed that the child had never been affected by the curse. This was the reason that made her flee and refuse to return to live with her people. It is also revealed that when she had previously asked to marry a commoner, the elven nobles rejected her request. They accused her of attempting to taint their bloodline. They then forced her to marry a noble from her own family. Takeru realized at that moment that Lodikar had succeeded in changing her fate and escaping the curse that had been pursuing them. On the following day, everyone headed toward the forest to search for the river Ariana. While they were on the way, Hofvalpnir sensed a powerful magical energy behind them. She asked Takeru to look back. When Takeru turned around, he found the sorceress of the Elven Kingdom, Ariana. She was the very person they were searching for. The sorceress ran toward Takeru and embraced him with happiness. She expressed her admiration for his intelligence because he had managed to read the message written on the magical stone. It is revealed that she was the one who wrote that message to frighten the nobles of the Elven Kingdom. It also appears that she is not on good terms with them. The sorceress began mocking Hofvalpnir. This caused Hofvalpnir to lose her temper, and the two decided to fight each other. Takeru stopped them immediately. He clarified that their goal was to solve the curse, not to cause further destruction. Lodikar returned with them to the kingdom. She showed them her daughter, whom she had born from one of the commoners. She confirmed that the girl was healthy. She also confirmed that the girl did not suffer from growth problems like the noble children who die immediately after birth. The queen was happy to have her granddaughter. However, the nobles were extremely angered. They accused Lodikar of breaking the rules and tainting the bloodline. When the dispute intensified, Hofvalpnir realized that the solution was in the hands of the sorceress Ariana. She decided to summon her. The sorceress then announced that the curse had befallen them because of their arrogance and their mistreatment of the commoners. She declared that the only solution was for nobles and commoners to live together without any discrimination. Everyone heard her words, and they refused to disobey her order. In this way, Takeru managed to solve the problem of the curse and made Elven society live together without any discrimination. On the following day, Takeru decided to return to the city of Belcom because his mission there had been completed successfully. The people and the queen began to bid farewell to Takeru and thanked him for his great help. Takeru went to say goodbye to Brolight, and she asked him to stay with them for a few days. However, he told her that he had many missions to complete and that he could not stay any longer. Brolight began to cry because Takeru was leaving. She wished to remain with the team and continue the adventures with him. After that, Takeru returned to the blacksmith and took the scissors he had requested. He was very happy with them because these scissors were very special for gathering resources. He spent a full month collecting resources and completing his guild missions. After that, we returned to the Elven Kingdom. There, Lodikar was asking her sister Brolight whether she was certain about her decision. She answered that she had made her decision and that she would never go back on it. Here, we understand that she had decided to return to Takeru and continue her adventures with him. After that, we see Takeru training Bee in the use of fire magic. Using her magic, she managed to kill a ferocious bull. However, it was clear that Hofvalpnir was not satisfied with the performance. She told her that fire magic must be stronger because she is the daughter of a legendary dragon. Suddenly, Takeru was shocked when he saw a sandstorm approaching from afar. Brolight appeared, riding her worm and running toward Takeru. When she reached him, Takeru could not endure the foul smell. He asked her about the reason for her arrival. She told him that she had convinced her family to return to the human kingdom so she could join his team and continue her adventures with him. The mage who had summoned Takeru to this world was watching all these events. He realized how successful Takeru had been in his journey. He also realized his ability to form friendships and complete difficult missions. He said that choosing Takeru had been a very wise decision. Takeru stood there, lost in thought for a moment. He said that since arriving in this world, he had faced many adventures and many problems. However, he was completely happy with them. He had also gained skills and experiences he had never seen in his real world. Now he is very excited to continue exploring the world in order to become the strongest mage in the world. Will our hero succeed in his dream? We will find out in the second season, which has not been released yet. If you are excited about the story of the mage Takeru, do not forget to support us so you can watch the second season with us. Until we meet again, goodbye.